Carla, and thank you. Yes, just do that there. There we are. All right. Thank you, Carla and Andrea, and welcome everyone. This is Amplify, that student voice, and today we are going to talk about some speaking, listening, conversation strategies for the academic skills classroom. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but when I say academic skills classroom, everything that we're going to be talking about today is definitely adaptable for many different levels of classroom. So we will talk about that a little bit later. I am John Trerotola, and I do teach currently at the Robbinsdale Adult Academic Program. I teach in the GED Adult Diploma area. This year I'm doing English and Social Studies. For many of you who know me, Social Studies is my background, my passion, but over the years, teaching English has also become a passion of mine as well. In the past years, I have had some experiences also in the advanced ESL classroom, which was wonderful. Definitely not my background, but then having those experiences, gaining that knowledge with colleagues and that type of thing, an area that I do feel very strongly about and enjoyed very much as well. So as Carla mentioned, please feel free to use the chat box with any questions or comments at any time. And also too, we're going to have some time during the presentation where we'll stop and we will want to hear each other a bit. And at any time, please don't hesitate to chat and share your classroom experiences as well, especially as we go through some of the resources and strategies, your successes, your challenges with those resources and strategies will be much appreciated. And as I always say, our best resource is each other. So thanks again for attending, and I think we're ready to start speaking and listening. And before we get into those resources and strategies and standards of speaking and listening, I thought we'd start with speaking and listening to each other. And we'll just take a few minutes with this. But I've put a quote just to kind of get us into the speaking and listening mindset. I've put a quote on the screen, and if you could, just take a minute, and I've put a few sentence stems up there to give your reactions to this quote. You can use those or just give your reactions in general. That is fine. Please use your chat box for this. But let me read the quote in case it's small on your screen. And then I just want to get your thoughts. And as I say, just kind of starting to talk and listen to each other before we proceed. So the quote, which is anonymous: speak in such a way that others love to listen to you. Listen in such a way that others love to speak to you. And as I say, I put a few sentence stems there on the screen. This quote makes you think. This quote resonates with you because, or this quote applies to my students or to my classroom, or when I'm thinking about incorporating speaking and listening activities into my daily routine. How does this quote relate to your students? So take a minute and I'll have Carla take a look at some of the responses and just share out a few. I'll take a look as well, but if you could, just take a minute to respond to this.
Getting lots of great answers to this. This quote makes me think that learning is a conversation. Makes me smile. If we were to follow that advice, communication would be much more pleasant and an effective activity. Easier said than done sometimes.
Yes.
And it reminds me how important listening is. It would be good to post this in a classroom.
good idea. I think I will do that too. Good idea. Yes, I just have this one or found this one somewhere, but I like that idea. Yeah, good thought. Thank you for that. Yes.
And it implies that we are noticing how our listeners are responding to us.
Mhm, mhm. Very important. Very important. Excellent.
Listening to others can make others want to listen to you.
So true.
Yeah,
So
great
true.
responses.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Yeah, no, that whole idea that teaching is a conversation and that response and the speaking and listening, it's and showing how they do go together for sure. Good. Thank you for those. And an excellent suggestion of posting this in I think I will do that in my classroom or in our respective classrooms, just as a reminder of the importance of speaking and listening. Thank you for responding to that. So our goals today, always many goals in a short amount of time, but we will be reviewing just briefly those 6 anchors in the college and career readiness standards that relate to speaking and listening, and really just pulling out those anchors and starting to think about, here are those goals and how can we achieve them in, as I say, in the higher level classrooms, but again, thinking of the adaptability of resources and strategies as well. That is a major portion of our discussion today will be to review and assess those leveled resources and strategies. These are resources that hopefully will enhance student voice on one hand, but then also develop those students' critical speaking and listening skills as well. And, these are skills for inside the classroom, of course, but as I've told my students too, that of course doesn't stop within the classroom. As soon as they are out the doors into the real world, so to speak, it's even more critical to be confident speakers, to be careful listeners outside of the classroom as well. Toward the end, too, we're going to investigate the possibility of creating a dedicated in-class or school-wide speech club. And this is something I have done and some of my colleagues have done in the Robbinsdale Adult Academic Program over the past, good heavens, it's probably been 4 or 5 years now, where we've had a dedicated speech group, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And it has really provided more opportunities for that dedicated speaking and listening and evaluating for all levels of students. And then, as I mentioned too a little earlier, we all want to hear each other, and there'll be a few points, not just at the end, but kind of midway through, where we want to hear each other and talk about successes, challenges, delivering that effective speaking and listening curriculum into our respective classrooms. And toward the end, if we have time, thinking about if some of the resources are new to you, thinking about that resource or that specific strategy that we talked about today, and perhaps sharing how you could use that in your classroom. And classrooms, as we all know, whether it be in person, hybrid, virtual, what we'll be talking about today can definitely be adapted to all of those different environments.
And John, there's a question that what levels are in your group in Robbinsdale?
So my level then is the GED Adult Diploma classroom, and we have that level. We then also have the basic skills, the pre-GED, and then 4 levels of ELL instruction as well. So things we're going to talk about today are going to be a little bit more at that higher level, that academic skills level, but as they say, the resources that we're going to be talking about, while some of these strategies may be at that higher level that I'll be talking about, the resources are definitely adaptable for all levels of basic skills and those kind of intermediate to higher levels of ELL classes as well. let's talk first. We can't talk about the resources and strategies without first having a quick review of the standards in the CCRS. And before we look at those, as I say, we're going to look at those just very briefly. Just want everyone to kind of consider this, that whether we have a virtual, hybrid, and or in-person classroom, that plus the speaking and listening standards can only equal success. And the success with speaking and listening standards can be really achieved through all models of classroom delivery. And as I say, from day to day or week to week sometimes, especially currently, we don't know if we're going to be in person or online. And those speaking and listening challenges, there can be that in both the virtual and physical classrooms. But as I say, the success with speaking and listening can be achieved based on the many resources that are out there. And as I mentioned too, many of these resources, they do require some access to technology, either for the teachers and for the students, but most of them are free and or use existing technology that students already have, perhaps phones, tablets, and so on. And, for the past 2 years, I, and you, I'm sure as well, have noticed that students are less inhibited by technology platforms for sure. So, and then many of these resources too that we're going to talk about are not exclusively for the computer. The tasks, the activities can certainly be downloaded and printed for, or as hard copies for student use within an in-person classroom, or as, forwarding to students in some sort of way. The speaking and listening standards involve 6 different anchors. I have started with the first 3, and really it's that kind of progression, starting at the beginning with that first anchor. We'll talk a little bit more about that first anchor in just a second, but that idea of having our students participating in those conversations and, most importantly, building on each other's ideas. That second anchor, that idea of integrating information in diverse media formats. And over the years, the question has come up, what does that mean? That kind of diverse media formats, visually, quantitatively, orally. But really, the point of that anchor is this idea that, students need to read and comprehend the printed words, but also they need to evaluate information that is coming at them in visually, perhaps maps, graphs, quantitatively in that number form, and or, for our purposes today, information that they learn from speaking and listening to others as they speak. So that one, very important for our purposes. And then that third anchor, focusing in on the evaluation part, not believing everything that one is hearing, and being able to listen to someone and evaluate what they're saying. Most important in today's world as well. Let's talk just a second before we get to the other 3 or overview the other 3 anchors. The question comes up a lot about what does that speaking and listening anchor 1 really mean? What is, are we, and I do this a lot, it's like, well, yes, I'm achieving the intent of anchor number 1. My students are talking in class, and I think I'm doing well with that anchor. However, I do appreciate that anchor 1 does include more than just having students, answer questions and talk to each other. And, and this now applies either in the in-person classroom or in the virtual classroom as well. And as I've noted, there are those additional skills that are required in or using anchor number one, using the intent of anchor number one of, preparing for conversations, building on each other's ideas, participating in rich conversations with, with each other, with us, the practitioners, the teachers, or whomever in the classroom as well. And understandably, this may not come naturally for students, especially if they're not used to talking to each other. They say a lot of students, I notice in my own classroom, they, talking to me, the teacher, and it's very, I will talk to you, but then having them talk to each other is maybe not as familiar for students. So through scaffolding, we need to give them the tools in order to have rich conversations with each other. And something to think about is just kind of like we did at the beginning there a little bit, introducing the language of, of speaking and of listening, and providing students with sentence stems. We provide students with sentence stems in writing, and same outcome with speaking and listening skills as well. That here is, if it's unfamiliar, here is examples of language we use to describe, language we use to agree or disagree with, and something I concentrate on quite a bit in my own classroom, that language of persuasion. We concentrate so much on reviewing claims and determining stronger arguments with regard to the GED. But that's one part, but then, having conversations about certain topics and viewpoints that have multiple sides, and then having students use this type of language to talk about those types of topics. So I've used these. Again, it takes building, it takes scaffolding, starting to see where students are at, introducing this language or these strategies that they can use in the classroom to speak to each other. One resource, and then we'll get to our other three anchors. One resource that I did want to highlight right away that you may be familiar with is from ESL Library. And ESL Library is a source that I can't say enough about. It is a source that, as I mentioned before, most of the resources that we're going to talk about today are free or have free options that are perfectly adequate for our classrooms. ESL Library does have a nominal fee. I think it's about $85 a year. And I just want to say, before our district purchased a subscription, I bought it myself one year, especially when I was teaching ESL classes, and it was worth every penny. But there's a link here, and I did want to mention too about the resources is that I have provided a resource sheet in the session folder that has the resources that we will be highlighting today and the links as well, the live links. The live links are also in the presentation too. So the link is there, and ESL Library does an incredible job with speaking and listening activities within the lessons that they provide, but more specifically, and just copied these two very small examples. They have a dedicated lesson on the language of providing feedback, so giving students opportunities to practice giving feedback to each other, which can be a very challenging skill for anyone. And on the left-hand side, it's a little small, but is an example of one of their mini debate lessons. And it's just that. It's a topic, in this case, a timely topic on vaccinations. And usually with ESL Library, it has vocabulary, it has a background reading, has some other kind of grammar activities. But on these lessons specifically, there is the opportunity then for in-class debate, in-class discussion on that particular topic. And included with these lessons is just what I just talked about a few minutes ago, those useful expressions and transitions for debating. So yeah, students are not left with kind of the what do I need to say, what are we doing, but using some of those, not all of them, but using some of them to get the conversation started, either between students in partner groups, small groups, large groups. I have done them all with lessons from ESL Library. Yeah. And just because it says ESL Library, definitely not just for the ESL classroom. Definitely I have can be adapted to the higher level classrooms. I use elements from ESL Library in my adult diploma GED classroom currently. Let's move on to the other three briefly, just briefly. So the next three anchors, or the final three anchors, are those more presentation type of goals in the speaking and listening standards. So that idea of presenting information, and not just presenting it, but presenting it in a way that can be easily understandable by the listeners or by the participants. And while presenting, making that strategic use of digital media, and not just putting in pictures and videos just because, but using them to support whatever the presenter is presenting on. And then finally, that anchor 6, that all important anchor 6 of the idea, encompassing that idea of speech in context, speech language in context, meaning that adapting speech to context, informal, formal, and that type of thing, and demonstrating that command of formal English when indicated or appropriate. Such an important task. I'm sure many of you are doing this on a daily basis as well, especially with the advent of social media, this idea of, this is language for social media. If you're commenting on your friend's Facebook posts about what they ate at a restaurant, that's one language or one type of style. And then, what about if I'm writing the GED essay? Totally different type of formal writing. And or if we're debating a serious topic, a current event topic, definitely the language used does need to be at that more formal level or more appropriate level for the context that is occurring. All right. So thinking of those, everyone, we do have a quick poll that Carla is going to start in just a second here. Thinking about those 6 anchors of the speaking and listening standards, and put up just a quick summary of each one on the screen as a reminder. I do not have them all memorized myself, but if you could think about a minute, or think for a minute here, please. And while thinking about the speaking and listening standards, which ones which ones are the most challenging for you? And you'll have a chance just to pick one. So maybe kind of which one is the most challenging for you. You may have others. I know I have multiple ones, but if I was going to pick out one that I have the most challenge with either determining resources or thinking of strategies for the classroom, or ones that I've tried to integrate into my classroom and just it never works with students, would like to get your thoughts on just for a second, and we can kind of see each other's. Maybe we all have the same issue with the same anchors, or maybe it's across the board, and we'll see that in just a second. Yeah. So here we go. Let's see. Ooh. Looks like I'll take a few more minutes. Looks like evaluation is a few more seconds here. It looks like most everyone is participated. Yeah, that wide range of conversations. Yeah, certainly that integration of, and our move last year to the virtual world. Yeah, that may have been a little more challenging before our move into total virtual teaching for the last school year. I think we are all much more comfortable. I know I am personally. Yeah. All right. What do you think, Carla? Maybe you. There we go. There we are. Thank you. Thank you. It looks like, the anchor 1, anchor 2, the digital media, the adapting speech. Yeah, they say that definitely is just kind of naturally incorporated into many of our skills that we review. But yeah, it looks like that evaluating a speaker's point of view. And thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing that. Yeah, thank you everyone. There we go. I'll do that there. So yeah, that idea of evaluating a speaker's point of view, and I think I too would put that one up there as a challenging one on both sides of kind of finding appropriate things, items to hear, and then that evaluation part. There's plenty of evaluation templates out there. I have used those, but yeah, this and maybe there's kind of that third part too of we've found something, we've listened to it, we have a great graphic organizer, but then it's just the concepts within evaluation, this idea of point of view, tone of the speech, and the purpose for speaking, and some of those skills that are a little bit more challenging, or I found challenging to teach as well. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you for sharing your considerations as well with those. And as I say, just remember too, we're going to have a few other times to share our own successes and challenges, instructional tools, and maybe kind of making it a goal, so to speak, too. When we do have some time here in a little bit to share with each other, what are you doing, for evaluation, and that type of thing. A few of the resources we'll talk about today will have that goal in mind of students as listeners and evaluators. So we'll take a look at those. But yeah, let's hear from each other a little bit later with that, or any other successes or challenges to make your students more effective speakers and listeners. All right, so we're going to talk about or highlight briefly some of the speaking and listening strategies and resources that I have used in my classroom, and I've had both classrooms, still have both. I have an in-person class and a virtual class currently. So ones I've used or ones that look promising, ones that I know of, I've maybe used once, but I'm going to put out there today for you to review, and or maybe you have used them and can comment on them as well. And there is that uncertainty on what way we will be delivering our instruction. And as I've mentioned, though, the highlighted resources can be used, can be adapted for the virtual, hybrid, in-person classrooms, and then also can be adapted for various levels as well. The strategies, though, as I mentioned a little earlier, based on the question, some of the strategies that I've put in are just, potential strategies to think about are maybe a little more appropriate for the higher level classroom, advanced ESL, GED, HSE, adult diploma type levels. But again, yeah, most everything is adaptable. And at the present time, based on the diversity of my learners in my GED classroom, it's basically kind of part content instruction and part ELL instruction as well. And that really does create such a rich environment where incorporating those speaking and listening skills is more important than ever. So there are so many resources out there to amplify that student's voice in the classroom, but please don't become overwhelmed. Over the last couple of years, especially with our switch over to total virtual classrooms the year before, I just remember all those resources coming at us. So I've put this slide in other presentations. I put this slide for my own reminder as well, is that while we're going to be reviewing quite a few of the resources and strategies today, please remember, I need to remember too that, choose just a few tools and get comfortable with those. I always like to remind myself too, we don't need all those bells and whistles when teaching online. We just need to, find tools, resources, strategies we're comfortable with and incorporate those into our daily classroom planning and routine for sure. So for students as speakers, I've kind of divided this into, we're going to look at students as speakers, students as listeners and evaluators, students as presenters, and then maybe just a few more at the end to review. And what I've done on each of these is put up a few resources, as I say, ones that I have used or know of that would hopefully incorporate itself well into the goal, in this case, students as speakers. And then I'll provide a quick background. I do have just a kind of a suggested strategy, and then we'll look at one activity from one of the resources in a bit more detail. Flipgrid is a resource, definitely that that anchor number one, preparing students, having them collaborate, having them build off of each other's conversations. Flipgrid is an excellent resource to do that with. And it's a controlled online environment where students can build those speaking skills and questions, and how it goes is that the teacher, teachers post that content via video or have the students read something. They go to the Flipgrid website and do the task that is there. But then what makes this an excellent speaking and listening activity is that then they can respond with their own video recordings or just own recordings. And it's a great tool to use just for that. It's also a great tool to use if you want to flip, kind of in the title there of the website or the program, if you want to flip your classroom. I have sent readings and videos to students before class. They've responded to a question or related prompt. And then when we're back in class, we discuss and build on whatever the particular topic was. And yeah, students can respond to each other. That's where that, building in each other's conversations comes in, or just the teacher can hear the students as well. So there's a lot that you can do. Susan Wettenkamp-Brandt gave an excellent Flipgrid presentation, an entire presentation on this tool, and would encourage people to look that up as well. The other one, Linked, I've used a few times, very similar. It's just another platform though, where teachers can create those assignments by voice recordings, and where then students can respond by voice or in writing as well. We'll talk a little bit later about that bridge between speaking and listening and writing in a little bit later time. So on the right-hand side, just a general strategy if you want to use one of these resources, giving students some type of oral response, and then they respond to a specific discussion question or anything that requires an oral response. The possibilities, as you can imagine, are endless. And the nice part is, yeah, as the teacher, you can go into the program, listen to your students' responses, assess their understanding and assess their speaking skills as well. And then, as I mentioned too, that whole part, that collaborative part or that building part on each other's conversations. Students can even watch the videos from their peers, respond, debate, whatever, whatever your outcome is for that. These programs will do that. Let's take a look. Just briefly, here is, and what I did with these is just pull out something from one of the various programs. This is how something would look on Flipgrid. This is, in the virtual world, and the student would log on. Very simple program to use for students to get onto, and taking a look at, maybe I have given them something to read, something to watch, but then posing a question. So kind of imagine this. This lesson is somewhere in the middle of a unit on, arguments, the GED essay, the whole idea of evaluating evidence, evaluating arguments. So it's kind of somewhere. We've done a lot of background, a lot of scaffolding up until this point. But this is a way to present. You have learned about how to evaluate resources. Read the attached arguments. Students would read 2 arguments, and then instead of writing down, the idea of their evaluation of the sources and evidence, it's more of a verbal type of response using Flipgrid. So, record your response. What sources is the author using? Which argument is stronger and why? What makes the other one weaker? All questions that we're asking in class. But by doing this, the student can really concentrate on, doing the activity, but then articulating, and maybe not articulating in front of everyone. They're just maybe articulating this back to you, the teacher. So, and I've seen students much more open if there's not a lot of other students around. They know they're just responding back to me and really open up quite a bit. So this is a great way. This is a great way in a virtual classroom. It's a little challenging to review writing itself in the virtual classroom sometimes. So this way, I can actually hear individual students and determine if they're getting comfortable with the skill and or if they need further support. And as we go through these, please, as I mentioned too, if anyone's used Flipgrid, definitely chat it out for sure into the chat box. Any other thoughts about it? Like it, don't like it, have done other things with it, and we would all love to review those as well. So if we go from students as speakers to students as listeners and evaluators. There's our listening and evaluation part, and these two kind of go together. We're listening to someone or something, and then sometimes let's evaluate it. Yeah, let's take it to that next level. And these are three resources. All three I use regularly, and especially that first one. If you have not had the chance to check out Listenwise, it is just that, an excellent program for listening. And just like so many programs, they kind of have the free version and they have the paid version. For Listenwise, though, they have a huge podcast library that is included with the free version. And that is all that I have needed going forward. The podcasts, they're short, they're based on current events, and they're really fun to use in the classroom and as a way to get students listening. So in this way, just purely listening to that, and then we'll highlight that one in just a second here, and you can see how that would look in the classroom. Of course, TED Talks, we all know, that kind of gold mine of topics, amazing listening, the evaluation, instruction, and I've used this, and there's so many lessons on TED Ed and TED Talks, either preset questions or ones that you can use, or you can make your own, your own set of questions, your own type of evaluation type questions based on TED Talks and that type of thing. And what I like about TED Ed too is that some of their topics are those ones that highlight the intent of the standards. For example, when we start talking about active listening in my class, there's a TED Ed talk on what makes a good listener. And what better way to talk about listening than to hear someone talk about ways to be an effective listener. It's a great introduction. So always good talks on TED Ed, TED Talks. And a new program for me too that I've started using is Ed Puzzle. And Ed Puzzle is one of those programs where you show a presentation on a particular topic. For example, actually, I'm going to do it tonight in my class on how a bill becomes a law. And it stops at predetermined points within the presentation for comprehension checks. So it's a great opportunity to that listening comprehension, not so much evaluation, but listening comprehension is that, we've watched this to this point, and then, we stop or it stops, and then a great way to evaluate your students' comprehension in small chunks versus just, let's just watch this 5-minute video and then talk about it. It stops, especially with topics that can be either complex or challenging. And to the right again, just a general idea on how to use some of these to help listening and evaluation of our students, and selecting a podcast, a talk, a speech. You can listen together, independently, however that works best for you. And then again, those evaluation guides, so many out there. I know you have, I'm sure, many that come with TED Talks, or just you've made up your own evaluation guide, but there are some really good ones out there. Using though, not just evaluation guides that what did the person say, but using those, having them in a way that you have sentence starters on them, and or helping students with that evaluative process, which can be can be challenging. And then, yeah, then using at the end kind of a classroom platform, one of those collaborative platforms where students can discuss, debate, evaluate what they just listened to. All right, here is the idea that I had from Listenwise, just in case this is an unfamiliar program. You get a little preview of this one, but please, yes, go. As I say, a free site. All you need to do is register for it. But this just gives an example of one of their podcasts. And again, current event. And this, yeah, weighty topic, but some of their topics, yeah, not so weighty. So it can be used for a variety of classroom environments for sure. But a little background, and then this is a story or an adaptable story from NPR. It's brief, and then with the podcast come those comprehension questions and or any kind of discussion themes as well. So again, if anyone has used Listenwise, chat it out to your colleagues and just with your thoughts on it, and or anything that is good to know about this program. All right, students as speakers, as listeners, and as presenters. So kind of getting into that second set of the standards, and students as presenters, multiple opportunities. And I've just put a few of these sites up here. These are just sites. Won't go into too much detail. You may use these. Padlet, Powtoon, Screencast-O-Matic are all sites to either have to enhance presentations. Padlet, many of my students have used Padlet to present their findings or if we have some kind of activity that students, this was definitely before our virtual world, but where students would put together some type of presentation. And presentations, yeah, sometimes I think, oh, presentations, those big speeches that students have to make. No, I've had luck with what I've put on the screen there is my strategy, just some vocabulary, kind of teaching to each other. We go over academic vocabulary. I review it, but then in the past I've had students create their own, kind of based on the words, the academic vocabulary words that we have used. Students create their own kind of presentation, and they're in charge of, so to speak, a certain word and putting it on or in a presentation, and then putting it all together as kind of a student-led word wall. And I've had some really good success with that. And as I say, yeah, students can export those presentations, we can share in class, or we have shared in class, and it's really kind of a different way to present, in this case, vocabulary. And for my classroom too, as part of the adult diploma, meeting those speaking and listening competencies, using these types of programs is such a way to do that. Some students like to, after they've written their argumentative essay for the adult diploma on the writing side, they've used their topic to present, or they've presented their topic in order to meet those speaking and listening competencies. They've presented their topic to the class, and then they have used, some of these programs to enhance their presentation on whatever topic they are presenting on. I did have TED Ed up there one more time, and had it for a reason. This is something I haven't done. I haven't done yet, but I want to do it because each time I think about speaking and listening, the standards, or going to presentations similar to this and hearing others, this always comes up, and just something to think about. Maybe you've done it. Please chat it out if you have done this. This idea of combining resources and having students create their own TED Talks, and that is that is something, as I say, I want to do and will do. This will give me that spark to actually apply it to my own classroom. But what I included in this, and there are many plans out there for this idea. I did put in one. It's in the resource sheet as well. And it's an Education World blog post on how students can create their own TED Talks. I like it because it's short, it's succinct, and can be adapted to many classroom environments. And take a look at that one if that is something you are willing to consider. I know I am considering that for sure. And so taking, watching TED Talks, using TED Talks, evaluating TED Talks, but then, as perhaps a culminating project, have students do their own. And of course, they can be short, they can be long, they can be on whatever topic. And then combining that with something like Screencast-O-Matic, which we all became very familiar with a couple of years ago, and we switched all over to virtual learning. It's a really simple way for either you, the student, whomever, to record themselves, and then being able to play that back as well. Screencast-O-Matic too, also good for practicing, I'm talking so much about the academic skills, but also good in some of these other ones too for practicing some of those soft skills. So students recording each other at a job, practicing job interview questions or that type of thing. I know other classrooms at my site have done that. It's like recording each other at a job interview and then watching it and that type of thing. So not forgetting those soft skills using these resources, because the speaking and listening, as I mentioned, as you know, not just for the classroom, but for the workplace, equally as important too. All right. So just a quick finish here. I don't want to overwhelm. I'm overwhelming. I'll be thinking, oh no, stop John with more resources, but just a few more to think about. We're not going to talk too much more about these. These are just a few more that you'll see on your resource sheet and for you to explore. But just this idea of these are there for you to use, to get ideas from as a vehicle then to use in your classroom. Parlay has all these incredible discussion prompts. Parlay is more of a collaborative writing site, but then why not start with some of the topics in a speaking sense, having students in a large group and in partner groups, small groups, converse with each other on whatever topic it is. And it doesn't, again, have to be a big weighty topic. It can be something, an icebreaker, a warm up on a particular topic. And then after the conversation part, having students bridge that into the writing, the writing side of thing as well. And a final thought with this is I put Common Lit on there. And Common Lit, I'm sure, again, many of you are familiar with, and obviously an amazing platform for reading, but it can be used for speaking and listening as well. And here's what I've done, and just as kind of a reminder, a strategy reminder, so to speak, is don't be afraid to engage students in speaking and listening that involve past or present speeches from well-known individuals. And I've done this particular speech many times over the years with some good outcome in my classroom specifically. But it can be, anything. I love to use speeches, and I love to use, in this case, this is from Common Lit. They have RFK's speech there. It can be read aloud. It has the discussion questions. It has other assessment questions as well. So it's all kind of right there. So this is, one way to do it, using this plus then I always try to find the original version of the speech speech. And that's always kind of fun too, just to listen to it in its original form. And many of these speeches, dating back decades, and how it's not crystal clear and that type of thing. So that just adds to just even a bonus for becoming more active, or having the students become more active listeners for sure. All right. So one more point, and then we want to hear from everyone just for a second here. Just that idea that whether we're in the physical classroom, the virtual classroom, the speaking and listening is, that one part. And from I like this diagram here, is that how it all incorporates together. So building in those purposeful speaking and listening activities, using some of those strategies, using some of those resources into lessons that develop that academic language. So, academic language is not only in written form, that academic language in terms of speaking, the skills in discourse, and it always sounds so kind of high level, but no, this can be done at any level. And by speaking, by talking with each other, by using the topics from some of those resources, it develops that language, those speaking skills, it increases knowledge, and then that bridge to something else, in this case, something to write about. So it builds bridges to written language, and then that translation, so to speak, of those oral skills, that academic language that they have spoken with, that knowledge that they have now, can then translate into a written outcome and product as well. Let's take a minute, everyone. Let's take a minute. Our time is going by. Let's just take a minute and speak and listen to each other. So what I'd like everyone to do, please, is think about how you have incorporated speaking and listening skills into your planning and instruction. And think about some of the resources we just looked at. We may not have as much time here at the end. We have about 20 minutes, and we do want to talk about that dedicated speech club here in our remaining time. But let's just take this as an opportunity to listen and speak to each other, and just kind of thinking about the resources, thinking about not just the ones I highlighted today, but just in general, have you had, or what have you had as successes, as challenges, and again, an idea or strategy that you have used to foster effective speaking and listening skills with your students. So if you, just take a minute. I have been speaking, obviously, quite a bit, and this is your chance to speak into the chat box, and maybe we'll just share out a few. Carla can take a look and see if anyone has, or over the last hour, if anyone has put something in there that has perhaps caught her eye, of something to share in terms of a resource, a success, a challenge. So let's just take a minute for that. And this is your chance to share with each other.
We've had a couple say they're excited to try Listenwise and take some time to investigate it.
Definitely. Please do. Yes, if you have not, please. Yeah, that has been one of, unfortunately, our the free version, as I say, is very good. But then so many teachers at our program did the same thing. They investigated it, came together, and our administration then bought a whatever they buy, a license, for all of us to use. And with that extra in Listenwise, you do get then many lessons in all the content areas as well. So it really breaks it down into social studies and science and English lessons on a variety of topics. And of course, as you pay more, you get then some bonus, activities, for listening. Their evaluation. Speaking of evaluation, their evaluation tasks are very good. They're scaffolded, they're leveled, and it takes students kind of through that process of evaluating something as well. Yeah. Anything else we need to share out?
Barb says many of her students enjoy and appreciate opportunities for conversation. What's challenging is that some can monopolize the conversations.
Good thought. I like good thought. And that's a nice thing, Barb and others, about some of these programs, especially if you want to have, and that's a way to use these programs like Flipgrid, or ones where students can record themselves, because two things. There's a limit to, you can set the limit on some of them. So a student can only have about 1.5 minutes to speak. And then, then it's that opportunity, instead of kind of having the hybrid conversation there, or organic conversation, I guess I was trying to say, in class, then you can, listen to each other by watching each other's responses. And it's only 1.5 minutes at that point. Good point.
And we've got several other comments. I enjoy using role play presentations and debates using breaking news topics.
Good, excellent.
Speeches on Common Lit.
Definitely.
Let's see.
Yeah, role play, definitely going way back to the beginning of our talk today. That ESL library has excellent role plays in it, with sentence, with verbal sentence starters, so to speak, and other ways to do that, so you don't have to just think up your own role play. And it's role plays that are not only classroom specific, but then are also workplace specific, and or just different environment specific. So yeah, definitely have students role play, and they love, my students love to role play, and really most of them really get into it as well. Yeah. All right, well, I think we should probably, I do want to have one more. I know we have about 15 minutes left here. And I do want to just have everyone consider one more thing with regard to speaking and listening. And this is, I'll just go through this briefly, and just with everything that we've talked about today, please feel free to reach out to me at the end here. I'll put my email up for sure, and especially with regard to this. And I did want to share this as something to think about, either within your class or within your program. And this idea of, along with class instruction, everyday class instruction, creating a dedicated speech club, and with the sole focus of enhancing student speaking, listening, evaluation skills. And this speech club, and I'll give you our specific example here in just a minute, it can, again, include just those students in your, at your level or at similar levels, or it can include students at different levels and that have different goals. And it works. And even down to a low-level literacy, it works for sure. And we'll talk about that in just a second here, and we see the example. But as I mentioned, we have done this at Robbinsdale, and in great success. It's been, we actually started, and this is a whole nother topic, is we started years ago, or actually a colleague of mine came up with the idea of having a Toastmasters club within our school. And incredible. It worked. It worked for a year. And the reason why it didn't continue to work is that with the dues and that type of thing, it's a little more challenging. But what we did, though, is morph that then into the Crystal Clear, Crystal Learning Center is the name of our school, our site, the Crystal Clear Speech and Leadership Club. And let's just I just want to take a few minutes, give you just a very quick overview. And again, if you say, hey, this sounds like something I maybe want to start at my site or in my class, I'd be glad to myself. And as I say, and a couple of other dedicated colleagues to this cause would be glad to talk with you in more detail. But as I say, it can be done. It has been done, and both in person and virtual. We offered this dedicated class. We did it during a time of that maybe one other class was going on, or during an afternoon time when there weren't as many academic classes going on, etc. We called it the Crystal Clear Speech and Leadership Club. It meets weekly. It meets for about an hour. Yeah, about an hour is plenty. And as I say, it includes students from academic skills, basic skills, ELL, and everyone kind of gets out of it. And even, as I say, even low, our kind of level 1 ELL class. And our wonderful teacher, Miriam, says, yeah, she sends students to this, and she says too, they may get a few words, but it's just being in an environment where all you're doing is speaking and listening. So it's not just for higher level or advanced speakers, for sure. And yeah, the outcome is just that, to have students become more confident speakers and listeners. And then we also incorporate this element of leadership into it as well, kind of that being a good speaker, being a good listener translates into being a strong leader. And then we do structure activities to foster all of these types of outcomes. And again, yeah, the activities support students' individual levels and their academic goals. And here's just kind of the basic learning targets that we hope to always accomplish, and not in just one session, of course, of our club meeting, but throughout the year for sure. And just again, all of those, all of these tie in with the standards, they tie in with our goals and our classrooms when it comes to speaking and listening. But again, it's just that dedicated time to really focus in on that particular skill area. What I'll do, and as I say, we use many of the resources we just talked about. And again, it's planned for students to provide multiple opportunities. So we're just doing that. Everything we're doing in this dedicated club or class, whatever we want to call it, is just dedicated to speaking and listening. And of course, the reading, writing, there's some reading, writing incorporated in, but the main focus is speaking and listening. And what I want to do, the next slides are just an example of slides we've used in one of our meetings, just to kind of give you an idea of the format. Again, it's only about an hour or so, and that is enough usually, since the students have attended other classes throughout the day. An hour is good. It could be a half hour, it could be longer, whatever you would feel is appropriate. But I'll just comment briefly on, here is, we would welcome the students. We have always, this is always our mission statement, shall we say, to remind students what the goal is, to practice speaking and listening and those leadership skills, and do it in a non-threatening way. And that students, and again, who perhaps aren't as confident with their speaking skills or in other classes or this or that, we have seen students that barely say anything in other classes, but being in a kind of a dedicated environment have just blossomed, and it's really amazing to watch that happen for sure. So and the support too is there, and students supporting each other, encouraging each other, don't be afraid to say something, and that type of thing. And our activities, we had either, students, sometimes, the goal was having the students give presentations. And other times it was doing some type of speech or speaking and listening type of skill task. And in this case here, we had an activity. We always had first speaking activity, so all the voices could be heard immediately in the room through an introduction. We came up with not just your name and your teacher, but then just a chance for every student to speak. That student, this may be the only time they say something during the time, but once is amazing and all you need. And in this case, I think this is one of our first meetings. It's like, who are you? Where do you come from in terms of the classroom? And then tell us what's the most important word in the English language. And yeah, it was good. It was good to do that. And then we watched this particular one. This gives an example of, we watched, I think this was one of our first meetings. So, what's the most important word in the English language? Then we coupled that with I think this was a TED Talk, perhaps, the sweetest word you'll ever hear. And it was a brief talk about the sweetest word you'll ever hear is your own name. So it kind of ties in with the introductions and that type of thing. So the students listened to the short article and then had a chance to speak. And we did it in small groups, first, and this was in person, I believe. Yeah, we all got into smaller groups, maybe some leveled groups or some mixed groups, which made it even richer. And then had some guiding questions for them to talk amongst themselves. And then at the end, this was a final slide that was just for myself and for colleagues that were working on this, or we were doing this together, is that we did then want to, this is a club, we're there to speak, but then also tie it back to learning targets. We're not just getting together to chat, that we are there for, to have specific learning targets that we always noted, and then also to tie in with the standards too. So as I say, not just a group to chat, we're just there to chat, which is good and important, but also to tie it back with the specific learning targets, tie it in with the standards, as students come, doing those informal assessments, as we see them develop into more confident speakers and listeners as well. All right. And thinking that time always goes by so quickly, I see that we have about 4 minutes left, about 4 minutes left, and maybe just a chance here at the end. I had one more stop here where we can chat out. Anything else? And maybe just use this as a time to, everyone is seeing the chat and some excellent things. Thank you for your participation in the chat, bringing up various things to think about, or resources, or just your own thoughts. So just a few more minutes here before we say goodbye to each other. And just also to an opportunity to remind you that we talked about a lot today in a short amount of time, and I completely appreciate thinking, yes, I'm going to now, I do this myself in similar presentations, I will now go and quietly reflect on all the resources, one particular resource that caught my eye, but you will, as I say, see those in the dedicated folder, the dedicated session folder, resource list that I've put together. I think we highlighted about 9 or 10 today. But again, just don't overwhelm, and take a look as you see would be helpful for your class, for your level, and so on. And then also think about that idea of a dedicated speech group. And as I say, it can even be done in the class. You don't have to have a certain time. You can just have a certain time within your class period, so to speak, or session, where, you know, it's just going to be dedicated to speaking and listening. The outcome would be beneficial, definitely, for all. All right. Any questions, anyone? Any questions, comments, anything I can answer in our last minutes here before we say goodbye? And as always, I appreciate your attendance, your thoughts. I will definitely look at the comments and definitely learn from you what is out there, what resources, what strategies you are using, and we'll definitely consider those for sure. I am by no means the speaking and listening expert. I learn from all, or we all learn from each other for sure, and build from there. But definitely, if there is something today specifically that you would like more information or to talk more about a speech club and how that, or how we set that up and how that's working for us, definitely send me an email. My email is on the screen. That is an underscore between the first name and last name, which always makes it a little more challenging, but please note that and reach out at any time. All right.